One is that it is obviously a very significant meeting because we have seen in President Trump's second term that U.S.-China relationship has really been under a lot of strain. I mean, they have a huge trade relationship, which is in China's favor, and President Trump had at one point introduced tariffs going up to 145% on China. And China had also retaliated in turn by introducing tariffs of 125% on US goods. At the same time, they blocked all exports of rare earths and rare earth magnets to the US, creating huge problems for their automobile industry and their defense industry. So China showed that it could also retaliate. Now, once this happened 3, 4 months down the road, when President Trump and President Xi Jinping met in South Korea last year in October, they agreed to turn back some of these tariffs and call a truce on this and said that, all right, let's stabilize the relationship. And since then, the relationship has not been as rocky. However, there are many other areas of disagreement that have come up, and so this summit, this is the first time that the last U.S. president to visit China was also President Trump in 2017. President Biden actually, he had meetings with President Xi Jinping, but did not visit China. So this visit is taking place almost 10 years now, 9 years.
Absolutely, sir. And we have also seen today that they reached an agreement on keeping the Strait of Hormuz open amid the Iran conflict, and China essentially agrees to it. So, how do you see this, sir?
Well, last week we had seen that Iranian Foreign Minister Araghchi, he had visited Beijing, and in his meeting with Chinese Foreign Minister Wang Yi, Wang Yi had said that, look, it is absolutely critical that there should be no kind of hindrance or blockade on the Straits of Hormuz. These are international waterways. Now, while this message was said to Iranian Foreign Minister Araghchi, let's not forget that this was also intended for the United States, because the US also has a blockade there. So this was a double-edged kind of a message. Now, Chinese dependence on oil coming from through the Straits of Hormuz is pretty significant. In addition to Iranian oil, they also get a lot of oil from the UAE. They get a lot of gas from Qatar. About 20% of their energy supplies transit through the Strait of Hormuz. So obviously, they are concerned about the continuing blockade in Hormuz. Second, they are also concerned because the longer it continues, the chances of a widespread global recession increase, because there are many other countries that will be suffering because of high energy costs. And as a result, if there is a widespread global recession, China, which is a hugely export-dependent economy, will suffer those consequences. So they, for a variety of reasons, both domestic reasons for energy supplies as well as for their economic reasons, would like the Straits of Hormuz to be opened as soon as possible. However, how this is proposed to be done is not something that is clear. I saw a statement indicating that they have agreed that the Strait of Hormuz should be opened, but on what basis, on what kind of an agreement, is something which we will have to wait and see when the joint statement comes out.
Certainly, sir. And she also gave a strong warning on Taiwan during the talks. How should we read this message in context of the current geopolitical context?
Well, I think the Chinese have been repeatedly making it clear that Taiwan is a red line. I think President Xi Jinping also mentioned that this is a red line for China. Before the visit, Foreign Minister Wang Yi had a meeting with Secretary of State Rubio, in which he had emphasized that China will take up the issue of Taiwan. China is concerned because in December there was a $14 billion military sales that was announced by the US to Taiwan. Now, that obviously causes a certain amount of discomfort. However, in order not to cast a shadow on the visit, weapons has not yet been implemented. So therefore, perhaps China sees this as an opportunity to perhaps influence the US in terms of seeing how they can discuss this issue further. But I must caution that when US and China normalized their relations, it was done on the basis of three communiques. This was in the 1970s. There was a 1972 communique, followed by a 79 communique, followed by a 1982 communique. In addition to these three communiques, there were also 6 assurances. And the US Congress in 1979 passed the Taiwan Relations Act, under which US is committed to provide weapons to Taiwan for its defense. It is also an assurance given to Taiwan, and it is codified in the Taiwan Relations Act, and it is part of the 6 assurances that the supply of weapons will not be a subject of consultation with the People's Republic of China. So, if I'm sure the Chinese would like to make their unhappiness about the weapon supplies known to the US delegation, to President Trump. But if President Trump decides to discuss this, it may be a little tricky because it would be going against stated US policy and US law. So we'll have to see exactly what is the manner in which this is taken up.
Just one last question, sir. From India's perspective, how should New Delhi assess this, the outcomes of Trump's China visit?
Well, I think if the fact that if they can come up with the positive agreement which stabilizes global economy, I think it is a positive outcome. If they can help, the two of them can help in trying to get the Straits of Hormuz open, I think it is a positive outcome as far as India is concerned. I don't think that we are certainly not looking at US policy towards China from the same fashion as we saw during Trump's first term, when he reactivated the Quad, raised it to summit level, and so on. Right now, we see that he is not particularly interested. Trump has been, in fact, if something like a little schoolboy, he's been saying, "Oh, I have been so honored to get this kind of reception in China. No other American president has gotten this," and so on. And so he is, and the Chinese have really laid out the red carpet for him and his delegation. He has also tried to show that he is accompanied by a very, very powerful heavyweight business delegation. And many of those CEOs who are on the part of the delegation have strong business interests, whether it is Elon Musk with the Tesla, because Tesla is manufactured and they have a huge factory in China, whether it is Jensen Huang, who's of NVIDIA, and so on. So there is a host of them. President Trump is also looking that perhaps the Chinese will resume some major purchases, because the Chinese blocked buying soybeans from US. They stopped buying beef from the US. They stopped buying marine products from the US. They stopped buying pork from the US and shifted it to from other countries. And so There's also the CEO of Boeing. So perhaps President Trump feels that perhaps they can place an order for a large number of Boeing aircraft. So let's see how some of the details that come out tomorrow. But for both countries, it is important to put some kind of a floor below which their relationship cannot be allowed to fall. Because while there is a rivalry between US and China, there is also a very deep economic interdependence between US and China. And that, if that is broken or if that is ruptured, that causes economic harm to both sides. So both sides are conscious of the fact that they cannot allow that to happen while maintaining their rivalry.